Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome to the 13th edition of the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature. Firstly, a big thank you to our session sponsor, Dubai Department of Tourism and Commerce Marketing. My name is Sally Mousa, and it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome, for the first time to the festival, one of the greatest thought leaders of our time. Amin Maalouf is a world-renowned scholar, best-selling novelist, and veteran journalist. Born in Beirut, he studied economics and sociology before working as an international reporter for An-Nahar until the Lebanese Civil War broke out in 1975. He then moved to Paris in 1976, where he became editor-in-chief for the newspaper Jeune Afrique. He published his first book, The Crusades Through Arab Eyes, in 1983, and in 1993, his fifth novel, The Rock of Tanios, won the Prix Goncourt, the most prestigious literary award in France. Maalouf is a member of the Académie Française and in 2010 was awarded the Prince of Asturias Award for Literature for his entire oeuvre. His work has been translated into 50 languages, and tonight we are going to be discussing his latest book, Adrift, How Our World Lost Its Way. How did we come to a point where the forces that divide us are working faster and more intensely than the forces that unite us? There are few who are as well equipped to answer the biggest and most defining questions of our times as Amin Maalouf. As a journalist, he has had a front row seat to many of the history-shaping events of the last half-century. And as a scholar and a writer who embraces both a Western and Arab identity, Maalouf brings a unique, multifaceted perspective where he surveys major global, political, and historical developments with a fierce intelligence, as well as a humanitarian earnestness that seeks to heal the destructive divisions that have overtaken our world today. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Amin Maalouf. Welcome.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Sally. It's a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
It is a huge honor. Now, please do note, everybody, that there will be a question and answer session at the end, so do have your questions ready, and you will be directed to the microphone by Mr. Bilal Orfeli, who is there with you. Ustaz Amin, it is such a huge honor to have you at the festival this year, and you actually wrote this book, Adrift, just before the COVID-19 pandemic, before the 2020 global financial crisis, and you have since added a postface addressing these new historic turning points. But having read the book, knowing that you read it before all of that, the book seems eerily prophetic. Were you surprised at all by the turn of events that defined 2020 and beyond?
Thank you, Sally. I am really worried. I have been worried for the last few years about the track we are going on. I think it is really a wrong track. I think humanity is going the wrong way, although we could go in a totally different way. We could build the bridges, but we're not building them. We could organize life between various components of humanity, and we are not doing it properly. So I was expecting something. My comparison was with the Titanic. The Titanic is on its course. We know the icebergs are here. We are going directly towards the icebergs. I didn't know which kind of icebergs, but probably that what happened, this pandemic and all its consequences, it's a kind of iceberg we have hit. And I hope that having hit it and having had to make a pause maybe we could use this pause to reflect on today's situation.
This is the most important thing that we can really take out of the situation currently right now. But I want to delve into your own personal story, because you really do share that alongside the historical events that you analyze in the book, and you detail your own family's history in the Levant. And the Middle East is, of course, home to some of our oldest and greatest civilizations, where East and West rubbed shoulders. And there was this intimacy and exchange of cultures that you say we've lost over time. Where do you see some of the greatest cultural and interfaith exchanges having taken place? And why did this turn into a wasted opportunity?
Well, that's certainly one of the main elements of my book. I try to recall all the events that I have been following, because I'm the son of a journalist. I worked as a journalist myself, as you said, and I've always followed world events, both our region and the rest of the world, eagerly for the last at least 60 years now. And I always followed them with passion. Sometimes what one sees is saddening, sometimes it's extremely worrying, frightening even, but it is also fascinating to watch the world being transformed. And I have been watching the events for all these years, and in this book I try to recall the events and also events from my own life and make sense of all that. I knew a moment in history when I was young, when things were much different from what they are now. The quality of relations between human groups in the Levant was different. Of course, I talk mainly of Beirut because I grew up in Beirut, and I think there was a quality of relationship between people, of mutual respect between various groups, eagerness to know the culture of the other. And unfortunately, because of the events in Lebanon and because of other causes that are not directly linked to Lebanon, this quality of coexistence has diminished. And I also remember a time when in the Arab world as a whole, there was a sense of hope. People were proud of some of their leaders. They were proud to see that they are playing a role on the world stage, that they were respected. Of course, I'm thinking of Nasser because he was the towering figure when I was a young man. And I saw the growth of despair, discouragement, and that is a very important element, not only in my life, in the life of the people around me, not only in the life of my home, of my native country, Lebanon, and its area. I think it affected the mood in the whole world. I think there is a sense of very aggressive identities, of violence, of an incapacity to live together and respect the other, which has grown, unfortunately. in the last maybe 40 or 50 years.
You talk very much, you go back and you look at the impact of British and European colonization on the Middle East in particular, and this idea that the Arabs needed to reclaim their identity. And as you say, we saw, in fact, not just a rejection of the Western colonizing forces, but some groups went too far, becoming violent extremist groups, and magnifying, as you say, divisions that weren't there before. So, how did that need for reclaiming identity turn into the establishment of extremism, of violence groups like this?
It's not easy to answer in a few words to such a question, because I think it is the main interrogation about this part of the world. As I hinted, I looked up to a figure like Nasser. He was a very interesting personality. At the same time, when I compare Nasser to somebody like Mandela, I feel we missed something in this part of the world. Mandela fought against the apartheid system, which is a very vicious system, even more vicious than colonialism, I think. And at one point, he triumphed. And the moment he triumphed, he decided that we have to turn the page of fighting and now open a new page in our history. He even went to visit the widow of the man who sent him to prison, where he stayed for 26 years. And he told her, you must stay here. This is a new phase in our history. So there is a kind of very generous, very noble attitude, which we did not really have here. When people were defeated, I'm thinking, for example, of the foreign communities in Egypt. I think although their behavior was not acceptable at some point, although their relationship with the British or with the royal family was not a sign of involvement in the life of the country, at the same time, they were assets for the country. It was possible to build on their presence and transform them and include them in a rebirth of the nation and its economic development, because they had connections to the West and to centers of the economic order. So we did not do that in our history. And I think, well, this is also a very vast question. I think that the nationalism of the type of Nasser was influenced by the ideas of its time. I think Mandela's time is a different time. Nasser's time was a time when we thought that the Soviet system, for example, was a very proper system to build an economy from scratch or to organize political life. And many people in the Arab world, including Nasser, thought that you could govern a country with a one-party system, which obviously was not possible. He used recipes from the Soviet economy, which in the Soviet Union produced disaster, and everywhere where these recipes were employed, they led to disaster. So what was in the mood of the time, in the spirit of the time in the 1950s and 60s, produced a very unfortunate situation in which there was no political development, no economic development, and it led to the disaster that we know, and which consequences are still with us.
They absolutely are. And identity is very much one of the defining themes of this book. And I want to go back to one of your other books, the seminal book on identity, where you write, "What makes me myself rather than anyone else is the very fact that I am poised between two countries, 2 or 3 languages, and several cultural traditions. It is precisely this that defines my identity. Would I exist more authentically if I cut off a part of myself?" And I think therein lies one of the greatest problems that is actually still facing us today. You wrote this, more than 20 years ago, but we still have, in the most globalized and hyper-connected world that we have ever lived in, we are still unable to see ourselves as embodying multiple identities in order to create a new global identity and awareness, and in turn a wider human solidarity, as you write in Adrift. You still see families where parents have migrated from east to west only to impose the rigid cultural traditions of their home countries on their children for fear that they might abandon their heritage. And, rather than adopting a new cultural identity that is fluid, that embraces different aspects of these cultures, we're forced to choose. Depending on the situation, depending on the context, we are forced to choose. And sometimes you're punished for not being enough of one culture or another. I wonder, Amin, do you see this as a major issue still? And what kind of impact does this kind of thinking have?
Absolutely. I think this is one of the major issues of our times. Globalization has brought us all together in a one forum, one word forum, where we are all assembled. But being assembled did not make us closer to each other. It made us look for what differentiates us from the person next to us. So this is the great paradox of our times. We are more and more like each other. We have the same vision of the world. We have the same instruments in our hands. We know the same things. We have the same aspirations, and at the same time, we want to think that we are very different. We are much closer to our neighbors than to our grandfather. Yet, we do not recognize the influence of our neighbors, of our contemporaries, and we want to believe that our grandfather and our great-grandfather is more important in our life. So I call it the vertical versus the horizontal. The real influence on every one of us is the horizontal version. We are much closer to our contemporaries than we think, yet we do not recognize this influence. I think it is very normal because we have been brought together very quickly by the acceleration of science and technology, and we have not yet assimilated it. We are still unable to cope with this, the rapidity of evolution. So we protect ourselves by saying, well, we're not so close. We're not so. We are still different from each other. So, in a way, one can be confident that on the long run, the main trend is a trend towards unifying the world, unifying humankind, which will eventually one day become a nation of very different people, but having a sense of common destiny. But on the short run, the affirmation of specific identities is more and more aggressive, and it will take time to accept the reality created by the new technology.
It's a reality that is created by new technology, and I think it's really important that we discuss social media and the impact that it has had on how we process the world today. It's interesting because there are those who say that social media has brought about new levels of awareness and connectivity, and justice movements, social justice movements coming up, and then there are many of those voices who will say, including those who are responsible for creating social media itself, that these platforms only serve to narrow our worldview because of the way that they are designed. The algorithms that they run on simply feed us back more of what we put in, what we indicate we're interested in. So if we're interested in our own kind, or we're interested in conspiracy theories, for example, as we are seeing right now, this kind of stuff that is going on in the United States and how that's kind of overtaken things, that's all we see. And then we essentially build our own echo chambers through this media that we consume. It is changed in such a way that this is where we are. And, one of the biggest issues is that once we live in these echo chambers, we can only see what we think is true, because it doesn't matter, whether it is true or not. That's what you're going to get fed, right? Because that's how algorithms work. And then we have no basis of truth. We cannot agree on what's true, because everything that I'm seeing is my worldview. This is what I think it's true. Whatever the other side might be seeing, that's what they think it's true, is true. And then we cannot agree on where we need to work together, where there is a problem. Is climate change real? Is the COVID virus real? What are the kind of, how do we, in an environment like this, come together and enable ourselves to work on the great challenges that are facing us all as a human race?
I think the tools that technology is giving us, they come with the technical user's book. They don't come with the ethical and social user's book. That book, we have to invent it. We have to write it. And it takes time. I think we need to integrate social media and all the new tools in our democratic life. But this is not something that comes spontaneously. When I was a young man beginning to work in journalism, there were important institutions. In Lebanon, we had Nahar and others. You had on the world stage, you had BBC, New York Times, Washington Post. Well, they were a few dozens very important news institutions that everybody knew. And today, every citizen in the world has the possibility of reaching as many auditors or readers as any of those institutions that were the great world institutions. So this is a huge power for every one of us. And we would be exaggerately optimistic if we can imagine that every one of us will be able to use properly this new power that we have. So it takes time, but we will never disinvent social media. So we have to live with them, and again we have to integrate them to our democratic life. The idea that every one of us can take part in the reflection and even decision taking in in every community, in every country. This is something very important. But it will take time to find the way of articulating this. Of course, today we have people who recreate tribes that are live together and think together and don't listen to what the others say. Of course, but we have to tackle the problem and find a way of using this new power we have to get together, because for the first time in human history, we are together. We have a common forum. We have the possibility of talking to each other from one continent to another. And I am fundamentally an optimist. I think that one day we will find the advantages of these tools, although in the meantime there will be all kind of discrepancies.
I love that you're an optimist, and that is very important here for the task at hand, which is so big. And it appears that we need to completely rethink the way, like you said, we need to rewrite that ethical handbook of how to approach ourselves and the world. And there are a couple of concepts that I want to put to you, because as you speak here in Dubai, I mean, you are speaking to an audience of more than 200 nationalities in Dubai, and a multitude of faiths. You know, you yourself, you're from a Christian background. I am Muslim. And, you know, there is a verse from the Quran that I come back to over and over again, and I don't think it has been ever as relevant as it is right now. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا. O humankind, we have created you from a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes so that you may know one another. So I want to put this to you because, you know, like it seems like this knowing one another, it really is about taking the time to really understand each other's stories, to get curious, to understand, you know, where we come from. And in that way, putting aside, you know, those preconceptions and realizing, as you said, that we're actually so much more similar than we are different. And the things that do make us different, well, we could actually learn from each other some things that would enhance our lives. So, you know, I just wonder, is this a naive way of looking at things, or is this the way that we need to look forward?
Sally, I totally agree with you. I think this is the way we need to think this way exactly. Sometimes we are irritated by what happens in social media, for example. And my attitude is to say, this is a huge place. We cannot just close our eyes and close our ears and say, oh, cruel world, we need to look at what is happening, try to build something, try to use these new extraordinary tools, which allow us today, more than at any time in the past, to know each other. Here we can know each other directly, immediately. So we have to build the new rules for democracy, new possibilities, new knowledge. We have, for the first time in history again, the possibility of getting all the knowledge of humankind without leaving our home, without leaving our table. Everything is here. We have access to everything. It's a marvelous moment in history. Of course, there are problems. Of course, it's not easy to manage 8 billion people with every one of them wanting to shout his ideas and his beliefs and his resentment. And of course, but this is a marvelous challenge. We have to tackle this challenge. We have a world to build. We have a future to build. We cannot just give up on it and say, well, there is no solution. We have to find solutions. This is our task. That's why we are alive. We have to find solutions and build something for our children and grandchildren.
Absolutely. And to that, I want to ask you about the role of the arts and creativity in this, because the arts demand that we tap into our soul, our stories, our humanity, and it's a way that we can communicate even without language. As Amin Maalouf said, art is the shortest path from one man to another and a bridge between nations. And, very much great art speaks to those questions, the difficult questions of who we are and where we need to move forward to. But, oftentimes the arts are downplayed as something superfluous, that it's a nice to have, but it's not essential in the world. Should the arts be playing a more central role in reversing this shift, Amin?
No, after the Second World War, there was a discussion, especially in Britain, about culture. And some people were saying, well, now we have a country to rebuild, we'll deal with culture later on when we have some more serenity. And Orwell intervened and said, this is exactly the moment when we need culture. Because we need direction. We need to know what to build. And it's even more true today. What is the main problem of today's world? We have everything we need, except that we don't know what to do about it. How we could build the best possible world, but we have the tools to build it. We have the means to build it, but we don't have the direction. We don't know what to build. We have a problem of orientation. I think this is the main difference between our times and previous times. In the past, when people had problems, they didn't have the necessary science to solve the problem. They didn't have the necessary wealth to invest and solve the problem. Today, we have everything. We just don't know what to do. We have a problem of defining our goals. And what helps us define our goals is culture. Culture will tell us what kind of society we want to build, what kind of human beings we want to have. And so I think at no moment in history, art and culture and literature were more important than they are today, at this juncture.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I wonder if we can start going to some of the questions from the audience. If there are questions from the audience, we can start going to those.
Yes. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Amin,
Thank
for
you,
this
Bilal.
fascinating discussion.
Bilal.
I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure we will have a few questions from the audience.
ممكن
Please.
أطرح السؤال؟
طبعا.
Sure.
مساء الخير. غادة درغام من دور شوير.
اهلا.
أستاذ أمين معلوف دايما من بيروت لدبي دايما كان امرق على فيرجن مش عم بعمل دعايات واخذ كتاب من كتبك. واول روايه قريتها صخرة تانيوس كنت بعدني من المدرسه وحضرتها مسرحيه بمسرح المدينه. عندي سؤالين سريعين. اول سؤال بالنسبه لغرق الحضارات، يعني جامع فيه كل قراءاتك، كل ثقافتك، كل يعني حاطط فيه كثير من اللي موجود، يعني كأنه حسيت كل اللي موجود بدماغ أمينة معلوف موجود بهالكتاب. فهل هيدا الكتاب هو مثل تمثال مايكل أنجلو اللي ما صدق أنه هو رخام، أو مثل تمثال غالاتيا بالنسبة لبيغماليون، أو في بعد؟ هي أول سؤال. والسؤال الثاني على السريع، حضرتك يعني العنوان بس نقراه غرق الحضارات بنحس أول شيء بيأس بتشاؤم، بس بنقراه حتى بنحس إنه عم تقلنا من الهزيمة بنقدر نخلق فرص. هل بتعتقد إنه بجيناتنا في حضارتنا وحضارة أجدادنا اللي حكيت عنهم هلأ، وهالجينات هيدي إذا وثقنا فيها نقدر نبني حضارة قوية من جديد؟ وشكراً لك.
شكرا لك.
I think
Okay.
I'm just going to put that
Please,
question
yeah,
out there in
of
English,
course.
just very quickly, just to say, you know, about the book Adrift. Our audience member is saying it feels like you have put everything that you have into this book. Is this, you know, the ultimate book that encapsulates all of your thoughts? And she asked about the way that Adrift, there's a feeling of despair in the title. However, you're saying that we can come out of it. So your thoughts on that, Mr. Amin?
I try to put all my feelings and my thoughts about the present times in this book. That's true, and I don't think it's a book of despair. I think a writer has two obligations. One is obligation of lucidity. We have to see the world as it is. We have to see the problems as they are. We should not tell our readers, our contemporaries, everything is okay. You can sleep quietly and all problems will be solved. No, the problems are not going to be solved. We are going through very difficult times. And what has happened in the last 12 months, I think, is an illustration of how difficult things might become. The other obligation is an obligation of no despair. We have, a writer has to look for solutions. Never, despair is never a solution. Discouragement is never a solution. It is a point from which one has to begin thinking, rethinking, rebounding, and this is my attitude. I think the world is going through a very difficult moment, but precisely because it's a difficult moment, we have to look for ways to get out of this predicament. Maybe this moment of pause that we were offered by the virus, this moment where the whole of humankind is pausing and reflecting on its problems. All of us in all countries, people are looking around them and trying to understand what's happening. I think it's a very good start to look to the future and try to ask ourselves, what kind of future should we have? How will we build our future? How will we be living together? And another aspect of the question, in 2 words, I think people from this part of the world, where you were born, where I was born, should be confident. I think they are going through a moment in history where they have lost confidence in themselves. I think they should regain confidence because they are sons and daughters of great civilizations, because they are open to the world, and whenever they are in a society that allows them to invent and produce, they are always among the best. So they have to be confident and never despair.
Thank you. We have another question.
مرحبا، أنا دكتورة رفيعة غباش، الإمارات، أستاذة في الطب النفسي وعضو مجلس أمناء مهرجان الإمارات للآداب. لدي سؤال حول المحاضرة، وهو إذا كنا جميعا نؤمن أن الثقافة وتنوعها مظلة للعيش المشترك، لماذا لا يتبنى هذا السياسي؟ والنقطة الثانية، أن نحن حين نتعمق في ما يحدث الآن في أمريكا، ليست المسألة فقط صراع سياسي بقدر ما هو صراع عقائدي بينهم هم كمسيحيين. حتى ما أدري إذا كان هذا الاستنتاج صحيح أم لا. أما السؤال الشخصي الذي أوجهه لشخص عبقري مثل أمين معلوف، كيف يتعامل مع الزمن؟ كيف يتعامل مع العمر؟ إنسان لديه الكثير ليقدمه ويجد الزمن يتسارع. شكرا، والله يعطيك الصحة والعافية.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rafia. So many questions there, brilliant questions. So let's kind of try and get through them quickly, because we are fast running out of time. She did touch on the fact that, you speak of culture and the importance of culture and humanity through culture, and why is this not coming up in political leadership? And she pointed in the direction of the United States as well. And, it's very interesting because you do talk about this in your book, and people think, what's going on right now maybe started with Donald Trump in 2016, but actually it has, roots back in the 1970s. It's very deep and it's incredible. You talk about the distrust of both local and international governments and authority, the idea of always acting in your own self-interest, and the extension of that, which is entitlement. And these are ideas that have been coming up for quite some time. We're seeing the ultimate conclusion of them in places like the United States. We just had the insurrection less than a month ago. We saw that. And it's kind of like the ultimate of all of these ideas coming together. So, to Dr. Rafia's question, why are we not seeing, these ideas of bringing humanity, of living together, serving others? Why is that not translating on a political level?
Really very pertinent questions. Thank you. I'll try to answer without taking too much time, since we don't have much time. For the first question, I think it is obvious that we need to organize coexistence between people who have different backgrounds. And I think that many politicians know it, but one should not assume that every politician has the interests of his nation at heart, I think there are politicians who try to use these differences and to build a political audience. There are so many people who try to dwell on these divisions. So I hope that there are, and of course there are people who are real statesmen who try to see how to organize relations between different people, but this is not the attitude of everybody, unfortunately. As for the United States, I think we have watched for strange years in the history of the United States, and I had the feeling that the strangeness of this the past administration has maybe hidden some of the realities that are there, that were there before this administration and will continue. Of course, there is a problem in the United States in the racial relations. I have never understood how things were left to deteriorate and sour to that extent for a great nation. I think there were shortcomings in all the policies in the United States under all administrations, and we should never have arrived to a situation of that kind, of so much disunity, so much, and there are also problems linked to the role of the United States in the world. I think 30 years ago, at the end of the Cold War, the United States appeared to be the sole superpower. And I think, to be honest, they were not able to assume this role, and they failed in that role. And today there is obviously a confrontation between a rising power, which is China, and the sitting power, the United States. And this will be probably a very, very long struggle that will occupy a number of years and decades to come. As for my age, I think the way I deal with age is to think about my grandchildren. I think, of course, we won't be here forever. I know I'm almost 72 now, but I think one doesn't have to think about one's own age. What is important is to see the world as it is today, to try to contribute to understand the world and have a few ideas, but those who will be building the future are those who are coming after us, and I always have in mind my grandchildren and their generation.
Thank you, Amin. Sally, I have 3 questions from the floor at least. So let us take them and then answer them together, because the ladies have been standing for a long time. We'll start with the first question.
Let's go. I think, yes, we're very much running out of time, but
we'll take the 3 questions very quickly, and then they'll answer them collectively.
I have 2 questions, and I will try to speak in English. Since I am French educated, like this, will not lose our the time for others. So I'm sorry for my English. In your book, this essay, you are trying to provide us a warning signal for the future. I'm not talking politics, but humanity. You don't think that after the failure pan-Arab dream, failure of USA, you were talking now, Europe, Africa, etc. You don't think that the UAE is an example of this future humanity? Since the dream of one nation of late Sheikh Zayed until now, with the year of tolerance and equality, the visit of the Pope and Sheikh Al-Azhar, with all this fraternity here, you don't think that there is a role AE play like a solution of this future? And my second question, I found here that all your books are sold in English and Arabic, translated to English and Arabic, but you write them in French. Is there any hope that Francophony will have a role in UAE one day and see your books on the shelves in French like you write them? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take the second question.
Yes, very quickly, please. We're very, very much over
very
time.
quickly.
مساء الخير.
Very quickly.
أنا ديالا أرسلان من علي. بدي أقول لك إنه أنا بكتب قصص للأولاد باللغة العربية، بس بعالمنا هون وبلبنان ما عم بوصل لمحل. كثير عم ينصحوني إني انتقل للإنجليزي أو الفرنسي وروح لبرات لبنان لأقدر أوصل. تنصحني ضلني كافح مع الأولاد الصغار أو بنسى الموضوع؟ شكرا.
That's it? Are they?
Yeah, that's the question. There
Okay.
is one more question. There is one more question, and
One more?
there's three more
Very quickly.
questions. I'm really sorry, Sally. Okay, but
I
very
think
quickly.
we
we'll
have
just,
to take this last one. We have to make this last one. We're very much over time. That's it.
زكية الجيوسي. بدي أحكي بالعربي. I know how to speak in English بس بحب أحكي بالعربي. بقدر ما قراءة كتب مع أمين معلوف بتعطي إجابات على أسئلة، بقدر ما بتثير تساؤلات أكبر من الإجابات، وهذا الشيء أنا كتير بحبه في كتبه. just تعليق على الهوريزونتال مع الارتباط العمودي مع جذورنا. بعتقد انها المشكله مش كيف احنا ننصهر اكثر افقيا زي ما عم تقول مع النيبرز، كيف نحافظ على الجذور اور فيرتيكال. هويته الانسان ما بيقدر ينساها، مش هويه واحده. زي ما قلت قبل احنا ننتمي لعده هويات، هي كيف يقدر الواحد يحافظ على هاي الهويات وتكون كل هويه منهم هي وسيله تواصل مع انسان بشاركني هذه الهويه. المشكله بعتقد انه فروقنا زادت لانه احدى الهويات بحس الانسان انها مهدده عادة بدون ما نحس it takes over تسيطر على الهويات الأخرى، لأننا بنصير خايفين وبدنا ندافع عنها. فبعتقد
I'm going to have to stop you there because we've run out of time.
I know. Just one comment that fairness العدالة إذا حققناها وحافظنا على الهويات راح تستمر. كومنت صغير على الكتاب، في كانت فقرة بتقول فيها عن لبنان وليش ما زالت التفرقة الطائفية أو الدينية وأنها مش موجودة في البلاد العربية، وقلت معها إيران وتركيا وإسرائيل، رغم أنه إسرائيل خارج المنظومة لأنها أصلا قائمت على إلغاء قومية ودين وما زال قائم. شكرا.
Sally, I have a solution for the other questions because we really don't have time. But I'll take the questions from you, and Amin has a panel tomorrow, and I'll make sure to actually ask them tomorrow.
Yes, I think that is a great idea.
Yeah.
Yes, Bilal is going to be moderating a special panel with Amin tomorrow. Amin Maalouf, what an enormous honor it is to have you with us at the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature, and just thank you so. We could talk to you for hours with your incredible insights. Everybody has to hit the books. Adrift. This is going to be at the bookstore. It is pre-signed. You must get it. You must read it. This is absolutely a must read for everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful moment for me. And thank you to all our audience. Thank you.
Thank you to the incredible audience, the fantastic questions that have come through, the audio-visual team, everybody who has been part of this, our title sponsor, Emirates Airline, our founding partner, Dubai Culture, the session sponsor, of course, Dubai Department of Tourism and Commerce Marketing, and the festival's parent organization that makes all of this happen, the Emirates Literature Foundation. Thank you all so much, and don't forget there is so much more to come from the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature. Thank you, Amin.
Thank you, Sally.